Representative, you have the floor.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon to all of you. First of all, thank you, August. Thank you to my friend, the Minister August Sántos, Sίλvα, for hosting us here today in this beautiful place, the Belém Cultural Center, and for the excellent organization of today's meeting, also for the gastronomy. I think that all the colleagues of the Foreign Affairs Council has noticed, and they are very thankful. It has been a long meeting because we had in our agenda three very important topics. First, we started with the relationship with Africa. I'm going to jump to French since we are talking about Africa. Nous avons beaucoup discuté sur l'Afrique, mais aussi on a discuté sur le développement au Mali. Et on a été d'accord en dire clairement qu'il faut respecter la transition pacifique qu'on avait commencée et que le peuple du Mali mérite. Nous sommes très préoccupés pour ce coup d'État dans le coup d'État qui vient provoquer une rupture dans un processus qui était très positif et qui représente un danger pour la sécurité dans les pays. We agreed to be more proactive with respect to Africa, more engaged, more vocal in our relationship with Africa, because in Africa there is an increasing competitive geopolitical environment. We are not only us Europeans there are other actors that are competing to have influence on the political and economic development of Africa. Africa will be soon the most populated region in the world. Today it's already the youngest region in the world. Half of the African, 60% of the African people are below 25 years old. And if the forecast of the United Nations becomes true, in 30 years Africa will double its population to 2,000 million inhabitants. You can imagine that this requires an important attention to Africa and to strengthen our already important political bonds. The European Union is the Africa #1 on economic development and political partner. Our foreign direct investment reached 200 billion, which is 4 times more than China. A lot of people talk about the importance of China in Africa. Keep in mind that our foreign direct investment is 4 times bigger than the Chinese one. And we can say the same thing about our aid, our financial aid to development. In 2019, it represented 20 billion on development assistance. This is a magnitude which is much bigger than anyone else. We must benefit from this engagement at the multilateral level. Together with the African countries, we represent 40% of the United Nations membership. But I also have to point that the degree of cooperation within multilateral fora can be certainly improved. We analyze the cooperation to support Africa in the post-pandemic world, during the pandemic and the post-pandemic also, and remember the fact that the President of the Commission has also recently announced an additional 1 billion euros in support to African countries to overcome the COVID challenge by increasing their production of vaccines. Then we discussed about the unresolved conflicts in our eastern neighborhood. We need to become more effective to protect the stability of a region that has direct repercussion on the Europeans. And believe me, The discussion was very long because there are so many unresolved conflicts in our eastern neighborhood that the ministers went in a long discussion, going conflict by conflict and analyzing what we can do in order to increase the peaceful resolution of these conflicts, to increase bilateral contacts, and strengthen our participation with the OSCE. Also, in view of the current Swedish and upcoming Polish chairmanship in office of the OSCE and the need to work more closely with the Biden administration. We agree on the need to be more visible and consider the participation on the International Crimea platform this summer in Kyiv, where the President of the European Council has already announced his participation. Also, a group of ministers will visit the 3 South Caucasus countries on my behalf to show our readiness to further engage in the region. Certainly, we discussed about Belarus, the forced landing of the Ryanair plane from Athens to Vilnius, which route was deviated by the Belarusian regime to land in Minsk, has been discussed. As the European Council said, it is unacceptable. The conclusions adopted by the leaders were clear. As you know, the European Council doesn't take decisions, only provide guidance, and this guidance has to be converted in practical decision by the bodies, other bodies of the European Union, in particular by the Foreign Affairs Council. We need to move more swiftly with sanctions. Work has already started, and the Council will decide in due time. We also agreed on inviting Ms. Tsikhanouskaya for an exchange of views at the next Foreign Affairs Council in June. She already came to the Foreign Affairs Council. It's time for her to come back again. And the third issue was the Indo-Pacific. The discussion confirmed our strong interest in becoming a strong partner for this region, where the key words are trade, climate, connectivity. We will work on a joint communication together with the Commission and the High Representative to propose a strategy for this Indo-Pacific area that will be discussed at the Foreign Affairs Council. And next week, I will travel to the region in order to visit the headquarters of ASEAN and Indonesia in order to exchange with our partners in the preparation of this Indo-Pacific communication. And last but not least, we had an interesting and open discussion which lasted much more than expected and prevented us from visiting the Hieronymus with the Jordanian Foreign Minister, Ayman Safadi, about the situation in Jerusalem and Gaza and the Middle East peace process. We agreed on the need to revive the peace process and restore hope in a credible pathway towards peace and justice for Israelis and Palestinians. We reaffirmed the solution of 2 states, but also the need of not just making it a declaration, but a purpose, an objective that require a strong engagement if we want to get it a reality. International community cannot be expected to support reconstruction costs indefinitely. It will be the 3rd or 4th time that Gaza has to be rebuilt, and we cannot expect the new wave of violence. The status quo is not an option. We need to engage in a process that brings peace through a political engagement. We are supporting this engagement with key international and regional partners, including, of course, Jordan, but also a revived Middle East Quartet. Finally, we talk about Syria and Lebanon. We consider yesterday's presidential elections in Syria neither free nor fair. They will not contribute to the settlement of the conflict, nor lead to any measure of international normalization with the Syrian regime. This is not a process that we can accept, and we call for the Syrian regime to engage in a genuine political process. This is not. And that is why we don't recognize these elections. In Lebanon, the situation is not sustainable. I've been invited to visit the country. I will do during this month, because the Lebanese political forces must put aside their differences and take responsibility. Things are not improving in Lebanon, and the country is in big economic crisis. And we will do our most to support solutions, but at the same time we have to require the political forces in Lebanon to take their responsibility, because nobody can take their place.
Muito boa tarde a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Muito obrigado pela vossa presença.
And thank you
Queria, da
very
minha
much
parte,
for
fazer
being here.
três
Now, I would
observações.
like to make three
A primeira
comments.
é agradecimento
First of all,
muito
I
sentido
would like
ao
to
alto representante
thank the High
para a política
Representative
externa e
very
de segurança da
warmly,
União
the High
Europeia,
Representative
meu grande amigo José
for
Borel,
Foreign
pela
Policy
sua presença
and Security.
e
I
pela
would like to
cooperação
thank Mr. Borel
estreita
for
que
his
permitiu ter
presence
uma agenda
and for
para
the
a
very
reunião
close
informal dos ministros
cooperation,
estrangeiros, na nossa opinião,
because
muito
the
rica,
agenda for
muito
our informal
substantiva
meeting was
e
very
muito
substantive,
necessária.
very
Depois
necessary.
tivemos também o prazer de contar com dois
And
outros
we
membros da
also
Comissão Europeia,
had
o Comissário
two other
para o
members of the
Alargamento,
Commission,
Oliver Varelli, e a
Oliver
Comissária
Varelli,
para as
Commissioner for
Parcerias
Enlargement, and the Commissioner for
Internacionais,
International
Jutta
Partnerships,
Urpilainen.
Jutta Urpilainen.
Os Estados-membros fizeram-se
Member
representar
states
todos,
were
praticamente
all
todos, ao
present,
nível
practically
ministerial,
everybody
o que
was
significou
represented
que
at
pudemos ter,
ministerial level,
dia
and that meant
e
that
mais
we
algumas horas
had
de
a full day
intenso
plus a few
debate,
extra
intenso
hours
trabalho
where we had a very
entre
intensive
nós, no
discussion
espírito do Gymnich,
in
que é
the
o
Gymnich
espírito de uma discussão
spirit,
livre,
which means that we have a
reservada,
free
aberta e franca
and
sobre grandes
frank
questões da atualidade
discussion
entre
on
os responsáveis da
topical
política
matters,
externa
bringing
da União
together
Europeia e
those
dos
responsible
Estados-membros.
for foreign policy
Portanto,
in the
a
EU
primeira
and the member
observação
states.
é
So my
de
first comment
agradecimento.
is that I wanted
A
to
segunda
thank you very much.
é
Secondly,
relativamente a vários pontos da
I
agenda
wanted to
da
say
reunião
something
de hoje.
regarding some of the
Foi
items on
possível
our
em
agenda for
estreita
today.
cooperação com o alto
Now, we
representante
worked
e o
very
Serviço
closely
Europeu
with the
de
High
Ação Externa,
Representative and the European
colocar
External
na
Action
agenda
Service,
pontos que são
and it meant
todos
that we could
eles
put
da
on our
máxima
agenda a
atualidade
number of
e
highly
alguns deles
topical points,
inscrevem-se naquelas
and
que
some of
foram e
these
são as
points
prioridades da presidência portuguesa do Conselho da União Europeia.
priorities for the
queria
Portuguese
saltar
presidency of
dois.
the European Union,
O
and I would
primeiro
like
foi
to
a nossa
highlight
discussão
two
sobre o
items. First of
Indo-Pacífico.
all, our discussion
presidência
on the
portuguesa
Indo-Pacific.
Teve a
The
iniciativa
Portuguese
de,
presidency
em
took the
colaboração
initiative,
em articulação com o Presidente do Conselho
working
Europeu e a
with the
Comissão,
President of the European
de
Council
organizar
and the
no
Commission
Porto, no
to
passado
organize
dia
a
8 de
meeting
maio,
in Porto on
a
the
primeira
8th of May.
reunião de líderes
That was
entre a
the
União
first
Europeia e a
meeting
Índia
of
que se
leaders
fez
between the
com a
EU and
participação
India,
de todos os
with the
Estados-membros da União
participation
Europeia.
of all EU
Já
member
tinha havido
states.
cimeiras,
In the
União
past, we'd
Europeia e
had
Índia, mas num
EU-India
formato
summits,
institucional.
but in an
Esta foi a
institutional
primeira vez
format.
que todos
This was the
os
first time
Estados-membros,
that
os
all
27
member
Estados-membros
states,
da
all
União Europeia,
27 members
puderam
of the EU,
reunir-se
were
com o
able to meet
primeiro-ministro da Índia
with
numa
the Indian
reunião
Prime Minister
informal,
at an
que
informal meeting.
produziu resultados importantes,
And we did
dos
achieve
quais
significant
destaco
results,
o relançamento
in particular,
das negociações económicas
relaunching
entre a União
of
Europeia
economic
e a
negotiations
Índia
between the
e a
EU and
assinatura
India,
de pacto
and the
conjunto,
signature
uma
of
parceria
a
conjunta
joint
para
partnership
a conectividade.
on connectivity.
Chamo a atenção para essa reunião
I just wanted
para
to draw your
dizer
attention to that
que
meeting
essa reunião foi
because
momento de processo
this
mais geral
meeting
que do nosso
was
ponto
an
de vista
important moment
é o
in a
processo
more
pelo
general
qual a União
process.
Europeia vai
And here
prestar
I'm
mais
talking
atenção
about a
à
situation where the
região
EU
do
is going to focus
Indo-Pacífico
more
e vai
on the
prestar
Indo-Pacific
mais
region,
atenção através de uma
and
estratégia
will be
própria
doing this
que o
via a
alto
specific
representante e a
strategy
Comissão
which the
têm
High
o mandato
Representative
de nos
and
apresentar.
the
E,
Commission
portanto, esta discussão que tivemos hoje foi muito
have a
útil
mandate
no
for.
quadro da preparação
So this was a very
da
useful
estratégia da
discussion
Europa
with a
para
view
o
to
Indo-Pacífico
preparing
e no quadro
Europe's
da
strategy
diversificação
on the
dos
Indo-Pacific. And this is
interlocutores
in the context of a greater diversification of our counterparts. In Asia and the Pacific, we have China, of course, Japan, Korea, certainly Australia, New Zealand, of course. But we need to focus on the whole group of countries which are a part of ASEAN, Southeast Asia, and also India. The second point I wanted to highlight on our agenda today was the discussion we started our meeting with, and that is relations between the European Union and Africa. Together, we, when I say we, I mean Europeans and Africans have to build a strategy together for continent-to-continent cooperation. And on this agenda, we have to look at issues such as green transition, energy transition, digital transition, investment, qualification of human resources, rule of law. All of these matters must be present. Therefore, we were very pleased to host this Gymnich meeting here in Lisbon. We looked at our relationship between the EU and Africa. And in April, here in the same building, in the Cultural Centre here in Berlin, we had the Green Investment Forum for EU and Africa, which was jointly organized along with the European Investment Bank and the Presidency. And my third and last comment was on our working lunch. We decided to invite the Jordanian Foreign Minister, Ayman al-Safadi, and we were very pleased that he accepted our invitation, and we had a working session together. Of course, the topic discussed was the situation in the Middle East, and we had a very clear consensus. Basically, we need to have security in the Middle East, and we need peace in the Middle East. In order to do that, we have to go back to the peace process in the Middle East. We mustn't just cater for more immediate and urgent needs, but we also have to relaunch the whole political process, which could lead us to a solution, which in our opinion can only be the two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Unless we come up with a solution to this conflict, we cannot guarantee that there will be peace in the region. And in order to do that, we all have to recognize that both peoples, the Israeli people and the Palestinian people, have the right to live in peace, freedom and security in their own territory. And for that to be possible, the political process involving the legitimate partners in dialogue on both sides must be strengthened. So I would say that today's meeting was an informal meeting, because that's only normal in the Gymnich format. It was a very enriching, substantive discussion, and we focused on a number of issues which are highly topical, and also aspects which are part of the structure of our foreign policy in the EU.
I'm Ana Romeu,
I'm a journalist from the RTP. I would like to put a question to both of you. Could you please tell us about this package of sanctions which you discussed in your meeting? That's sanctions on Belarus. Are we moving towards the more economic dimension here? Because in the course of this morning we've been talking about potassium imports, restrictions, oil products. Is there a consensus in the 27 member states, and when will this be put into practice?
Look, let's make things clear. Who does what? Who does what? The European Council, the leaders, agreed, because they don't take decisions from the operational point of view. They provide guidance. They tell us, to the other bodies of the European Union, how to proceed. They agreed on a new package of personal sanctions, which was already being prepared. But additionally to that, they consider the need to go to economic sanctions, economic and sectoral sanctions. This is the guidance that the European Council provided. Gymnich today is also an informal meeting, as an informal meeting cannot take decisions, debates, and provide guidance to the technical bodies of the European institutions. These technical bodies, at the level of the Council, had already started after the European Council, and the package of personal sanctions is almost ready, and I don't think we need to wait for the next formal Foreign Council in order to be approved. It will be approved before, because we can do it by written procedure. Additionally to that, on the framework of the discussion about the Eastern Partnership, because Belarus was not in the agenda specifically, certainly we consider the guidance that we received from the European Council about economic and sectorial sanctions. And some ideas were put on the table, but for sure nothing has been decided, and some considerations has been done, but the important thing is the work at the technical level, where member states will propose ideas. Well, these ideas certainly will affect economic sectors. There are not so many economic sectors that can be affected because the exports of Belarus are very much concentrated in some fields. But first, has not been any decision because this body doesn't take decision. And secondly, we have just considered how to look at these economic and sectorial sanctions that has to be decided by the technical bodies, second, under proposal of the member states, and thirdly, approved by the Foreign Council on the next meeting. At the same time, I have to tell you that in order to adapt our regulations to economic sanctions, we need a little bit more of time. Not more, but it's not automatic. We have to arrange to adapt the legal framework to the implementation of economic and sectorial sanctions.
My name is Victoria Valdezi. I'm from Reuters. Mr. Borrell, I was wondering if you could expand any further on how the EU's stance towards Mali could be affected by the recent political situation. Specifically, we'd be interested to know if the EU training mission's presence or role will change at all, and whether there are any concerns that EU-trained soldiers could have been part of this coup.
Certainly, we trained the Mali army, and it is not the first let's say, activity of the Mali army interfering with the political setting of the country. It's not the first time. We are training the Mali army because Mali is being jeopardized by a strong activity of jihadist groups, rebel groups, and without a strong capacity of the army, the country will fall apart. The situation is very fluid. The last events are recent, less than 1 day to a couple of days. So the only thing I can say you is that for sure the training mission continues there, that we have requested the immediate liberation of the President and the Prime Minister, something that has happened, and keep in touch with the military in order to explain them that this is not the way out of the crisis. I was in Mali some weeks ago, explaining to the Mali authorities that this transition should not be another more between two coups d'etat, and stressing the historical importance of this process. I am really very sorry that after having exchanged with them, a new military intervention has created a change on the dynamics, a positive dynamic that started after the coup d'etat and the transition to a new attempt to build a democracy in Mali. But I don't think we are going to stop by the time being the training of the training activities of the militaries, because they are very much engaged in fighting all over the territory of Mali, And I don't think it's going to help the country to stop this activity. But let's see how things are going.
Susana Freixas, SIC Expresso. It's not a technical question, it's a political one for Minister and High Representative. So we know that Mr. Lukashenko was already included in November in a list of sanctioned people, and still we see a flight being forced to land in Minsk. So is it realistic to expect that with this process this young journalist is going to be released? We see that, and we heard Minister Mas speaking about a spiral of sanctions. So what do you expect actually to happen, and is it realistic to expect for a release? And also a question, if I may, 2 days ago the Commission announced 8 more millions to help Palestine. Is it enough? Thank you.
I can answer the first one, yes. You answer the second one. Okay. Exatamente porque a lista de sanções em aplicação, que inclui vários dirigentes do regime da Bielorrússia, incluindo o seu presidente, não está a ter o efeito de dissuasão
this list isn't having the dissuasive effect we would need, as has been shown by this act of state piracy committed last Sunday. That is exactly why European leaders were very clear in the guidance they gave us on Monday. And this guidance is as follows. First of all, we have to strengthen the sanctions addressed to natural and legal persons linked to the Belarusian regime and linked to this systematic and major infringement of fundamental rights. And secondly, study the possibility of applying other kinds of sanctions, economic sanctions. Thirdly,
a Organização Internacional da Aviação Civil
appeal to ICAO and ask them to carry out an independent investigation in order to investigate what happened on Sunday and to determine who is responsible for what. Fourthly, call upon European airlines to stop overflight of Belarusian airspace, because quite clearly this airspace is no longer safe for civil and commercial aviation in the EU. And fifthly, introduce a ban on the Belarusian airline company for overflights of our airspace. So we are increasing pressure on their regime to ensure that they comply with basic rules, basic international rules. When somebody gets into a plane, a commercial plane, to take a journey between 2 European capitals, that person has to be sure that that trip is not going to be intercepted by a fighter plane.
The explanation that the Minister gave, Mr. Sándos gave, it's perfect. About the question was, is 8 million enough? Enough for what? For sure it's not enough. The reconstruction of Gaza will cost hundreds of millions of euros or dollars, whatever you prefer. And the international community, and in particular the European Union, cannot continue reconstructing every 2 or 3 years what has been destroyed on a new wave of violence. That's what I insisted on, the need to start another process of peacekeeping, because the status quo is not affordable. Someone can believe that the Palestinian question is over. It's not over. We can consider that the Israel-Arab question is over because, yes, with the Abraham agreements, a lot of Arab countries has been recognized in Israel, but the core of the problem is the problem is between Palestine and Israel. This has not been solved. So we have to face the problem. We will reconstruct Gaza because These people need help, but certainly 8 million will not be enough. Much more will be needed.
Muito boa tarde, Sr. Ministro e Sr. Vice-Presidente.
Good afternoon,
Meu nome é Beatriz Cel, sou jornalista da agência
Vice President. I'm from
Gostaria de
Lusa
saber até que ponto é
Agency.
que a trégua
Now, this
entre
truce
Israel e
between
Palestina poderá
Israel
ser
and
considerada
Palestine, to what
consolidada,
extent do you think
partindo
this is
da sessão de trabalho
consolidated
da hora de almoço com o Ministro nos Negócios
following
Estrangeiros da
your
Jordânia?
working
Gostaria também de pedir
lunch with
comentário sobre a
the
convocação do
Jordanian
embaixador
Foreign Minister?
francês
What
ao
about the
Ministério dos
recalling
Negócios
of
Estrangeiros de
the
Israel,
French
na sequência de umas
ambassador
declarações do
to
Ministro dos Negócios
Israel
Estrangeiros
following some
francês
declarations
no
made
domingo passado,
on
que advertia para
Sunday
risco de apartheid em
saying
Israel?
that there
Obrigada.
was a risk of apartheid in Israel. What do you have to say on that?
About the, well, about the consolidation of the ceasefire, who knows? By the time being, it works. We were asking for a ceasefire at our last Foreign Affairs Council, and happily only 26 or 27 member states supported it, but it was enough, a big majority, 26 out of 27. So we can say that the European Union was asking for the ceasefire as President Biden, as Secretary General of the United Nations, as the Pope. Everybody was asking for it in order to avoid more civilian casualties. The ceasefire came. I'm sure it came thanks to the US engagement and the brokering by Egypt. In any case, ceasefire started, it's lasting. Let's hope it will last. But once again, we cannot rely on ceasefires, violence, ceasefires. Security is not peace. And what is needed is peace. And peace will not come by miracle, will come through political negotiations. And there are not many different solutions. The status quo is not viable, as this new wave of violence has demonstrated once again. And the two-state solutions have to recognize we are very far away from it, further away than ever. So we have to put that on the table and not just to pronounce the magic words, two-state solution, but to work and to engage on it, because I don't see any other solution. And the fears that some colleagues can express about possible situations, well, I prefer to work and really engaging on the two-state solution, which is the only one that can provide both to Israel and Palestinians dignity, freedom, and being able to live together.